could we be at the boiling point for the Biden family as we see the intricate plan to save Joe back in 2020, spike the laptop, win an election, gradually unwrap that plan, and now we see that plan, and it does seem diabolical. With me right now is Jonathan Turley. Jonathan, we talked last night on, as I filled in on Jesse's show, but it does seem as though Mike Morrell, under oath, came out and said, I wanted Joe Biden to win the election. I was asked to collect these 51 prestigious names, and I did when it came to the Hunter Biden laptop, labeling it classic Russian disinformation.
Yeah, it's a familiar pattern, of course, because that's the same pattern we saw with the Steele dossier. When the Steele dossier first came out, various reporters expressly asked the Clinton campaign, did you fund this? Is this your doing? And they said no. And later, a New York Times reporter and another reporter accused the campaign, people like Mark Alias, of really sort of lying to them, of concealing their role in this. But the pattern goes beyond that, right? I mean, the Steele dossier should have immediately raised alarms over the lack of support to these allegations. It did with people like Bob Woodward, who recently said, I told them not to go with this, that this was not a reliable story. Well, now we're seeing the same pattern with this letter, and it really shows the eagerness of the media. You know, when it comes to Hunter Biden's laptop, the media immediately said, we're not going to report on this. Even before the letter came out, they were resisting it. And yet when they get this unsupported letter, they just immediately replicate it. They don't ask, they don't press on where it came from, who was behind it. And the result is that in now successive elections, we've had this type of disinformation being placed by campaign figures into the body politic.
Jonathan, you must get this a lot. I mean, when there's a controversial court case or something that comes up in politics that has a legal angle to it, they would love to know that Jonathan Turley believes, let's say, I back Brian Kilmeade. He's in trouble. Like, I call up. But you have a reputation. You have to say, hey, Brian, I like you, but the case is dicey. I can't put my reputation on it. I can't get my head around the fact that Michael Hayden, I know he had a health issue, but Leon Panetta, that I know Clapper and Brennan are politically compromised. We knew anything, they just hate Trump. But if you look up and down, this is some big names that we have seen interviewed on all different topics in the war on terror and the Cold War. And they, sight unseen, as far as I could tell, didn't even pick up the phone to say, hey, Joe, is that your son's laptop? Because I'm about to sign a letter that says it's Russia's idea. I don't want to put my reputation, which I earn off of, I give speeches on, I'm proud of, on the line if it's not true. And basically, nobody asked, and they're all declining to comment right now.
No, it's very true. First of all, with regard to any allegations made involving Brian Kilmeade, I always accept those as true. They're sort of self-authenticating.
Well, you just eliminate yourself as a good backer, but go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'll defend you to the end of the earth.
Thank you.
But you're perfectly right in all of this, in that the Hunter Biden laptop, what was interesting is that many of us wrote on the laptop in the early days. And one of the things that I wrote about was that this laptop seems to have self-authenticating elements because they're referring to emails that obviously have recipients or senders.
Yes.
So this was not hard to confirm, and yet the media struggled to find a way to say, we don't have to report on this, and even more so that it's probably false. And even when the president in a debate tells the American people, I've got this letter saying it's Russian disinformation, which we now know was prompted by his own campaign, the media still doesn't want to inquire. But you can see that in all these interviews. As you noted, Brian, these would be easy things to ask the president. You know, did you ever sit down with Tony Bobulinski? Because he said
once.
You did.
No one has. Yeah, no one has asked him that.
Yeah, and you know, when you say that you had never had knowledge of your son's dealings, how about all of these pictures and visits from his business associates? How plausible is that in light of your own voice captured on a message where you're talking about his business involvement. None of that is being questioned. I think part of the reason is that the Biden campaign really was brilliant in how they handled this. They got the media to buy into the illusion by calling an audience member to the stage to make something disappear. They are now invested in the trick. For the media to now admit, wow, there's a lot of influence peddling here, and this could have national security implications, would be a self-indictment.
Yeah, the fact we got to this point, when people talk about, oh, this election was thrown, it was stolen, forget about everything, vote harvesting, all that stuff. If you just look at the information that was given to the American people and what wasn't, and what forces were working together to make sure the voters didn't find out everything they needed to know to decide a very, very close election. It was really decided by 200,000 votes in certain areas, and Donald Trump got 72 million of it. This is the type of story that I think is a bigger story. And I just find it fascinating, too, what's emerging now with the this whistleblower, with the possible attorney, calling out the possible attorney general for blocking an investigation that would move forward on Hunter Biden and possibly reveal the rest of his family. As the House is looking for bank records, it turns out a whistleblower has emerged from the IRS with a 20-year track record as an investigator, saying there's bias in the investigation. He couldn't sleep, and it is a he, has come forward, and his lawyer has confirmed that the attorney general is involved in the accusation. As we wait to see this person come forward, and maybe you can help me with this, they say in a quirk in the federal law, this whistleblower needs congressional approval to more fully describe his allegations to his own lawyers, which he wants to do before testifying to lawmakers. Your thoughts on what the whistleblower has constraints?
Well, there are some restraints. I've represented whistleblowers, and it's a rather complex web of regulations. The fact is this lawyer is going about this correctly. What's breathtaking is the attack by Hunter Biden's lawyer saying that, well, I think he just committed a crime, strongly suggesting the whistleblower should be criminally charged. It's ironic because recently Hunter Biden asked for his critics to be investigated by the IRS. And so the fact is that this whistleblower does need permission to speak to these committees, but he's going to get that. The issue of perjury of the attorney general is a little more challenging. I don't think that a viable case is likely to come out of that because of the general language used by the attorney general. But that's not the main issue here. People need to focus on, and that is, was there political influence at the IRS? That itself is a crime, by the way. Interfering with a tax investigation is a crime in and of itself. But it also would explain why many of us have been writing for months that there's no perceptible movement in these cases, and we can't understand it. I mean, many of these crimes that are alleged by Hunter seem to be well supported. He had to pay his taxes late with the help of a wealthy friend. The gun form that he is accused of having false statements on is rather demonstrably true. So this would certainly explain part of that delay.
Again, I know the attorney general I'm not, I just don't get involved in that. I think in the bigger picture, let's just remove all, don't get too involved, don't dive too deep. Let's take a step back. From what you know of this case and all of your experience in Jonathan Turley, do you need 5 years to figure out what Hunter did and didn't do?
No, and a good example of that is the foreign agent violation. I don't see how you can possibly look at these records and not find that he was an unregistered foreign agent. The Department of Justice slammed various Trump officials with these FARA violations, including Paul Manafort. There are really strong analogies between this and the Manafort case. So that's an example of how this one seems to be moving at a glacial pace when they seem to move with great dispatch against people like Paul Manafort.
Yeah, I would say so. In the event that this does move forward, just an observation, do you notice that unlike 2020, we're now seeing NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox covering this story? Have you noticed that?
Yeah, there's an interesting, if you look at this coverage, there's an interesting change. I mean, part of the most interesting aspect, of course, is the belated acknowledgement that the laptop is authentic. But you'll notice that while the media came forward with a sort of begrudging mea culpa, okay, we got this wrong, they don't explain why they didn't do this over the last 2 years. But also they say the laptop is authentic, but then they don't deal with what's on the authentic laptop, right? So the media doesn't actually deal with these emails that are suggesting that President Biden was at least projected as a recipient of some of this money. So it's a bizarre framing of this.
Yeah, Jonathan Turley, there's always there's always a lot for you to comment on. We live in a very litigious world. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Brian.
You got it. Have a great weekend.